Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. We bring you thought-provoking guests and topics every week to challenge your thinking about leadership. Our aim is to help you become the leader that you wish you always had as we learn together and lead together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm honoured today to be joined by Dena Patton. Dena is an elite business coach and transformational speaker who has worked with thousands of purpose-driven business owners and world-changing leaders around the globe. And her focus is on helping people find their greatness in leadership. Today, we're going to focus in on exactly that. What does great leadership look like? And Dena is going to present to us her three-step approach towards finding your greatness as a leader. So without any further ado, Dena, I would love it if you would please say hello to the audience. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and what led you to be a coach and to focus on leadership.
Thank you for having me. And I would start out with saying that I have been in love with leadership most of my life. I admired leaders before I even knew what leadership was. And there were so many great leaders around me and I admired them. And it wasn't until my 20s, I moved from Phoenix to New York City. It was a really big dream of mine. And at 21, you're very courageous at 21. I sold everything and said, I want to move to New York City. And I did. And it was a very scary jump. But what I found myself doing is surrounding myself with leaders and not being scared of being the dumbest one in the room. You know, we got to surround ourselves with brilliant people, greatness people, leaders who have purpose. And one of the biggest things that I did at a very young age was just that. And I got really fascinated with the world of leadership. I think a lot of people are thrown into leadership. They don't know what they're doing. They weren't mentored. They just say, hey, you're now the director of HR, or you're the director of marketing, and they have this leadership role and they don't quite, know what they're doing. They're throwing spaghetti on the wall. So through my 20s, as I owned a PR and marketing agency in New York City, I was very fortunate to sell that when I was about 28. And then I took all of my wisdom, everything that I had learned in New York with my business, all my mistakes, and I put it into a coaching and consulting business. And one of the three pillars that I felt so passionate about was leadership, because I think there's just not enough. There's not enough training, development, and focus around empowering leaders. So that's the short version of how I got there.
All right, brilliant, Dena. So you used some interesting words there. You said that you were surrounding yourself with leaders, but at the time you didn't really know it. And it's interesting in terms of when you're led by a great leader, do you always know it at the time?
It's such a good question, because at the time, I don't think I had the awareness specifically around leadership, but I knew what you admire. Everybody listening knows what you admire. And there's something about when you look at what you admire, it's because you want more of that. I wanted more leadership in my life. I wanted to become a great leader. I didn't have those words at 21 and 22, but I found them at 25, 26. And then got very, very intentional about it. And that's where the game changed.
So here's what's coming into my mind, Dena, when I hear all of that, is I think most people would know what bad leadership looks like because they've experienced it, they've felt it, and they always remember how that feels. So when a bad boss, even a well-intentioned bad boss, treats you in a way that you feel disrespected, you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, etc., they do something that makes you scratch their head and you think that they're some kind of sociopath or whatever the case may be, most people know a little bit about what bad leadership can look like, but I believe this is where I'm going with this. I feel like it takes intentional reflection about what you said there about admiring someone to go, what was it about them that made them who they are? And that's a deliberate intentional step. You're going to stumble across bad leadership without any effort, but to stop and reflect on what great leadership looks like, I think is an intentional act. How does that sit with you?
I think you're completely right. In that 25, 26 time for me, it became very intentional. And I was starting to see great leadership all around me. And I got very intentional about leaning into it and going, what is that about? How did they get that done? How did they move this group of people? How did they lead them out from this to that? So I got, it's part psychology because I love psychology and mindset. And I really started reflecting and learning and leaning in to what makes good leaders. And it is not by accident. We don't come out being born a great leader. It's a learned skill. And that's the good news for everybody listening. It doesn't matter where you think your leadership is. You might be a 1 out of a 10 or an 8 out of a 10, but you can become better. And it's a learned, you can always get better. And you just keep learning. You're never done. And the second you think you're done, that's where your leadership tops out.
Yeah, good one, Dena. So there's 2 takeaways that I've got there is that it is a learned skill. It is something that you work on every day, but it needs to be an intentional act. It's not something that's just going to magically form. It's something about paying attention of what's going around. When you have those bad leaders, what was it about their actions? And what will you do to make sure you don't repeat the mistakes of bad leaders you've had in the past? And when you've had those good to great leaders, what was it about them that inspired you, motivated you? How did they make you feel? And how can you, I'm going to use some careful words, how can you replicate that but in your own style to make sure that you still bring you, so you don't want to just mimic some leader. Yeah, really good. All right, Dena. So that leads into a couple of golden questions, an age-old one. What is leadership?
Gosh, at the basis of it is leading people. In my world, greatness is everything that I breathe, everything that I teach is based in greatness. And what I am all about is helping people shift from smallness leaders to greatness leaders. And, most anybody can lead people from this to that. Let's do this action or let's build this thing. And they just boss people around, right? And it's a lot of tasks and a lot of bossing, right? Some people call that leadership because they were the ones that led that team. But for me, my standards of greatness leadership is at a different level. And that greatness leadership has 3 components. And it's important, like you already kind of mentioned it, is your leadership style is important that you have taken all of the good and we observe all of the bad and we create our own leadership style to lead our people. But I think a lot of people are scared to have their own leadership style because what if it doesn't work? What if people judge them? It's having fear is a big, big barrier. So they just do what other people are doing, right? So greatness, for me, greatness leadership is having your own style of leadership that leads other people to their greatness through the platform that you're leading them through. Whether you're a coach leading a team to victory or a corporate leader leading your marketing team to success, right? Sales. But that's just the platform. The thing that you're trying, the objective, the winning objective, yes, you're trying to lead your team to that objective. But I'm going to challenge you. Who are you being in that journey? Are you being your greatness? And are you pulling the greatness out of your team while you're winning, while you're going towards that goal? For me, that's the game.
So I'm hearing 4 things there, Dena. I'll start with the basic is that, with different levels of definition out there, leadership is about getting a bunch of people to do something, to act in some kind of way. It could be influencing the way that they think, but generally it's getting people to do something. Then the second thing is the difference between, let's say, methods of leadership could be anything from the directorial boss that just bosses people around and micromanages them and directs them what to do every step of the way versus inspiring them because they want to do the things. And then the third element that I'm picking up there is then about creating the next generational leaders. So a great leader is not just achieving some kind of outcome, they're creating the environment where their people can find their own greatness. And then the fourth one is that authenticity of bringing your own personal attributes to it. Don't just mimic that leader that you've had before. Find your own way. How does that summary sit with you there?
Absolutely. You got it. And that is really, that last one is the first pillar of my 3 pillars of greatness leadership is getting grounded in your authenticity. And, a lot of people don't even know their authenticity. Who are you under your role, under your title? What do you stand for? Authenticity is our biggest currency. And number 1 is this, getting clear in your vision, values, and purpose. Your vision for your division is what I call that. What is the vision for your division, right? When I propose that question to most leaders, they don't know. They're like, my vision for my division? I don't know. I'm just leading them to this objective, right? But how do you want it to go? How do you want it to feel? What do you want in this division? What is the vision for your division? It is so game changing when you start to have a vision for your department or your division. So start out with a vision that inspires you. Second is values. Now, your company probably has values, right? That hopefully you are aligned with. If you are not aligned with your company's values, that leads me to coach most people in saying, this is not a fit. You do not have a values alignment with your company. You're probably pretty miserable because they stand for one thing and you stand for another. So it's probably not a fit. But let's just say your values are a fit. So those values that you stand for, how are you standing for those values in your division? How are you holding your people accountable in whether you have 4 people, 40 people, 400 people to those values? How are you celebrating that they are walking out those values, right? And then the purpose. I like inspiring people to have their own, this is leaders, having your own purpose in your division. This is your own personal purpose. What is your purpose for leading this team, being in this company? If you don't know your purpose, which is your why, we lose our way. We lose our why, we lose our way. And then you just become what I call a smallness leader that's just throwing spaghetti on the wall. You're just going after the objective. There's no purpose. There's no vision. There's no value. There's nothing. It's just very tactical and you're getting a paycheck for it. And that's why a lot of people are very miserable because there's no meaning, right? And I'll tell you a story. A client of mine who worked in an organization, about 350 people, and she was in HR, but she had a huge heart for nonprofit. And I was coaching her in her leadership. And she said, you know what I really want? I want to quit and go work for a nonprofit. That's where my heart is. This is a very transactional, deadline-oriented organization. I am not that type of person. And I just feel very not aligned. And I said, well, what is your purpose? And she said, I want to give back. And I said, well, let's just look. You have 10 years at this company. You have a lot of say. You're a leader. Could you create a give back nonprofit program inside of this organization that you could own and drive? And all of a sudden her mind just went, oh my gosh, that just opened her up because her purpose is with giving and love and compassion. And that's not the company. It was very transactional. So what she did was she went to the CEO, got approval and said, can we test this for 3 months? So she chose a different nonprofit, local nonprofit, and got their wish list, brought it in. And she put out an email every month and said, hey, this is our chosen nonprofit every month. This is their story. This is what they do. And this is their wish list. And we are asking for you to donate these items. And the employees would all bring, these items. It might be socks or it might be paper. It depends on, whatever the nonprofit was. But essentially, she had this nonprofit drive every month and she was utilizing the 350 employees to do good in her community. So all of a sudden, her purpose was alive and utilizing the platform that she had access to, but brought her purpose inside. So that's just one of, I could tell 150 stories like that people can bring in a new level of meaning, purpose, vision to what they're doing so that they are happier and more fulfilled and lighting other people up too. It meant not only was she lit up, but it brought a whole nother level of purpose to all the employees.
Okay. So the theme that I'm hearing here, Dena, that's coming through quite loudly for me is this whole concept of think globally, act locally. And where am I going with that? So you got your three things there. You've got your vision, you got your values, you got your purpose. But everything you said there was to localize that in some way that is meaningful. So the words that you used were vision for your division. And you're right, most companies have got a vision. Hopefully it's a vision that the company lives. Sometimes it's just a bunch of words on an office plaque, right? But hopefully it's a vision that the company lives. But when you say vision for your division, let's say that you are running the accounting department in a company, it's to bring that down to the local team. Hopefully it's congruent with the company's vision, but how are we living it within our team? Every team in every organization in the world has got stakeholders. So it'd be to look around and go, well, we're the accounting department. How do we want other departments to see us? They're our customers. They're our internal customers. We have external customers. We have internal customers. What do we want others to say about us? Then the same thing with the values. Yes, there's probably values written on the company's website, and there's probably values that the CEO talks about at town hall meetings, etc. How are you living those values in your team, and are they congruent with your own personal values? And then with purpose, same thing. If you are in a organization, there's a chance that it's got some kind of purpose to it, but how do you localize that to your team? And I'm going to go a step further, Dena, to every single individual in your team so that they understand that what they do has purpose and meaning every day. They're not just playing with spreadsheets and getting paid to make pretty spreadsheets. What they're doing has some kind of knock-on effect to some other stakeholder who then they're enabling others to do things that ultimately lead to the purpose and vision of the organization. So I love this kind of, you're almost narrowing it down to what can I do? What can my team do that has vision, that lives our values and has purpose? How does that sit with you?
100%. 100%.
Okay. So we then spoke about this personal aspect of it and building your own personal leader. I call it an amalgam leader, by the way. This is something that I've taught in my programs and in my book as well. So this concept of the amalgam leader, what tips do you have for people to bring themselves to that?
Well, you have to be willing to do the work. Leadership, it is a title, but what I say is leadership is an action, not a title. We want everyone on our teams to lead, right? And so it's about leading your group, your team, yes, to the goals of your division, but making, like you said, making it personal down to the purpose of the team. And, I had a client recently, a VP of construction, has 28 construction guys on his team. And there wasn't a lot of connection, and there wasn't a lot of, what do I want to say? There wasn't a lot of, there's loyalty to the company, but there wasn't a lot of connection to the team and to the leader. And, once I started coaching the leader and saying, how are you connecting with your guys? How do you see if they are fulfilled? How are you doing team building? What are team building activities that your guys would love? And these are things he never, ever thought about. And then we started really unpacking his vision for his division. And he started to see, I don't want this to be just a paycheck for these guys. I want them to be lit up. We have such an awesome team and an awesome leader. And that takes work. And I think there's some leaders out there that aren't willing to do the work. If you're willing to do the work, you've got to ask yourself some of these questions. Where am I leading my team? Who do I need to be? What is my purpose here as a leader of 29 guys or 300 guys or 3 guys? And here's the thing a lot of leaders do. They live in the stories in their head. Like, my guys don't want team bonding, or my guys don't want purpose. We're human beings. Each one of those guys have kids, and they are a role model for their kids. And they are men that want purpose. Just no one's ever asked them what it is. So we can live in our smallness, like, I can't do that, or they won't like it, or this is all fluffy nonsense. And I'm telling you, it changes the entire team. So do the work, be willing to do the work, and start with one thing, start with one baby step. You don't have to start with all 3, your vision, your values, your purpose. One of the things about values is all of my clients, they acknowledge their team theme around values in every staff meeting. It's only one or two, right? But how you keep something alive. If you want to shift your culture, all culture is the values in action. If I walk into a company and the culture is negative and it's toxic and everyone's disconnected, it tells me that the leaders are not standing for their values. They're not keeping the values alive in any sort of way, because culture is the culture because people are living out the values, right? So when I see a team member who did value number 3 really well, I'm going to acknowledge them in the staff meeting, maybe with whether it's a high five, good job. I saw you do XYZ value number 3. That was amazing. And maybe it's a gift card but let me tell you, where we praise is we get more of. It's just like children, as parents, if you set rules for your kids and then you praise them when they do it, guess what? They're going to do it more. We want to praise our people when they are doing things that work. And that one of those things is values.
So there's a few things popping into my mind there, Dena. So coming back to what you were talking about with the construction workers, let's say, and there are some leaders out there that will say, oh, yeah, my team aren't into all of that kind of stuff. But there are some universal truths about what people are looking for in the workplace. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be valued and respected. They want opportunities for learning and growth. And they want to feel like they matter. They want to feel like they individually and collectively matter. And that is part of your role as a leader, to get people to understand that their part of what they do matters. It matters. And it's something that you mentioned, kids, that they can go home at the end of the day and be proud and say, oh, Mum, Dad, how was work today? Well, it was great. This is what I did today, right? And to be actually proud because they understand that what they do matters. And then with the values, we get the behavior that we celebrate. We get the behavior that we reward. We also get the behavior that we tolerate, which is another lesson in itself. But when you see the behaviors and the values in action, you do need to acknowledge it in a way that the person sees and feels it, but also those around them also see it. Because if they see Jim or Sally getting acknowledged for the way that they lived value number 3, as you put it, they'll want to do it the next day.
That's right. And what you allow continues. If you have one bad apple on your team that just is constantly not performing, going against the values, bringing people down, and you're not addressing it, what you allow continues and it will only get worse. And one of the hard part of leadership is the course correcting, right? It's really easy just to drive an objective, drive goals, get people to be productive. But those hard conversations, how do you have the hard conversations and turn people around when they're off track? That's a big part of it. But one last little tidbit is just around around the hard conversations is another story around a guy who leads a team of 11, and he was feeling a little disconnected and a little bit in story of my guys are guys and I don't really know how to connect with them. Here's a really easy, really tangible thing that you can do this week with your team. Ask your team all to have one-on-one 10-minute conversations with you. It could be over coffee. It could be just, walking down the hallway, but you're going to ask them one question. And that is, what is one thing that I can do, you as the leader, that I can do to help you be more successful this year? Ask everyone on your team that question in a one-on-one safe environment. You will be shocked. Some of them won't have that answer just right then. They'll have to come back to you. That's okay. But I promise you, it's life-changing because they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel supported. And then you're going to fulfill on that. They're going to tell you one thing, and then you're going to write all that down, and then you're going to do those things with your team. Life-changing.
So there's two aspects there. One is the aspect of the servant leadership, to show that you are there to support them and to serve them and to create the environment where they can do their very best work. And the second thing that comes to mind there, Dena, is adaptive leadership. By staying curious and really taking the time for all of your 10 staff members, if that's the size of your team, that you've taken the time to get to know what makes them tick and what environment would work for them. And that is part of our role as leaders, is to understand our team, the individuality of that team. Collectively, they're amazing, but they're also a group of amazing individuals. And individuals have different needs in the workplace. And if you can listen to them and deliver on that, you're going to get the best out of them for sure. So how does that sit with you in terms of both servant leadership, but then also adaptive leadership?
Absolutely. 100%. I love that you recap my tips because I think it's just so important that people walk away with those tangible tips that they can actually get in action around.
And there's immediate call to action there. That's a 10-minute conversation. All of you can afford that. And yeah, you might be surprised at the answers that you get from the different individuals. And you will get, by the way, you will get what Dena was saying. Some people, if you've never done this before, you'll get some people with deer in the headlights going, why is my boss asking me that? They've never asked this before. So you might have to ask it a few times, or you might have to hold some space for people and say, yeah, you know what, go away, think about that, come back to me in a couple of days and let me know your thoughts, right? So if you've never done it before, they might take a bit to getting used to that.
Yeah. I want to step into step 2 of my 3-step tips around people problems. And this is what I have seen a lot in, especially teams under 100 people, is the lack of systems and processes. Is that when you have a lack of systems and processes in your business, in your division, your people are working harder and longer than they need to be. The whole power of systems is creating a well-oiled machine so that everything's lighter for your business. And one of the biggest things especially in the small business space, is if you, again, are leading a team of 4 or 10 or 50 or 80, usually what happens is that started out with a very small team of 3 or 4, and then you jump to 10, and then you jump to 20, and then you started really scaling and you jump to 40, and now you have 60 employees or 80 employees. And that jump, that climb was, your eyes were on, the leader's eyes were on revenue, was growing the brand, hiring people, is a lot of systems and structures and processes aren't put in place. And then people are exhausted. And so that second piece around people problems, if you have people who, it sounds like this, I'm working too late, I'm so exhausted, I'm over capacity, I'm over this job, like all of that overwhelm shows me that usually there is a lack of systems and process in your division. So what I want you to do, I have a saying, where there is chaos, there is no systems. So when you look at your division, I want you to take a pen and paper out and think about the breakdowns and the chaos that happen often, right? Like that thing keeps happening. Like we have a breakdown in this. I recently worked with a PR agency where they were just constantly in breakdown in their onboarding system. Just breakdown, the last 20 clients, breakdown. When it's repeatable like that, what that's showing me is when there is breakdown or chaos, there's not a repeatable process there that your team can clearly execute on. So people are winging it, and winging it usually creates breakdown. So take a pen and paper, do an audit on your division and go, where are our breakdowns? Where are our chaos? Especially if it's like repeatable. And that is going to show you don't have a system there. What I did with that business, we created an 8-point onboarding system. And then we assigned people to the different points. Now they have a very well-oiled onboarding process. Everybody knows what their part is, and there's no guessing. There's no winging it. There's no throwing spaghetti on the wall. It's clarity. Clarity moves the train. Confusion derails the train. So that's what I would say is that second piece. It looks like it's people problems because they're exhausted and overwhelmed, but under that, it's actually a systems process problem.
Yeah, I'm loving some of the language that you're using there, and you're breaking down systems and processes into something that's far more understandable and avoids the kind of, when most people think of process, they think of bureaucracy, etc. But this is not what you're talking about. You're talking about systemization, and it's that ability to remove those single points of failure in your business where you might be, or in your team, where you might be reliant on those superhero individuals that have got particularly unique skills that are always the people that you go to solve problems, but that in turn is creating a huge weight on their shoulders and putting them towards stress and burnout. And what I'm hearing is your ability to put the systems in place and the processes in place gives some of that stress relief of the base load of the organization. And what I want to bounce off that and hear your thoughts on is by doing that, including what you said about having a learning organization and understanding, well, where are things breaking down and and what can we do about that? When you get that solid baseline in place, it doesn't make humans robots. It then gives them the mental space to be able to be their very best, to be creative and to work on what does the next level of greatness look like. So how does that sit with you?
Absolutely. And I think you just nailed it about some leaders feel like creating a process or a system is limiting, right? But it's actually creating clarity and confidence and structure for people to succeed in. And so whether it's, I have literally coached every industry on the planet, whether it's shipping yards, it's high-end auto detailing, it's luxury homes, it's book publishing. One of the things that, I transform is systems. And it's something that I've seen in every single business that I coach is a lack of systems, because most leaders think that they're barriers and they're restrictive versus, the real power of having a process and a system is it creates a well-oiled machine. And we want our employees to be lighter and happier, especially if you're a leader of a division, whether that's 3 people or 30 people or 300 people. What is the process here? What is the system or what is the structure so that they know they know how to do it, but then they get freedom inside of doing it. So it might be an onboarding system. It might be a sales system. I've worked with clients who I would say a sales system is something that is very, very, how do I say, put in a box called winging it. A lot of clients of mine just are winging their sales process. They don't have a clarity and confidence. And that's what we want, clarity and confidence in the systems. So whether it's your sales system, your admin systems, your process inside of your division, say you're the design division, what are the systems so that all the designers are designing the same way? Right? Or this auto detail client of mine, when you have 20 shops all doing auto detail, you better have a process your way that makes you unique, right? And how you greet your clients, how they take on the car, how they work on the car, how they show the client all the things that they've done, just all the points of customer service, and then how you follow up with them and how you book them again. That's all a well-oiled process. And it gives them so much clarity and confidence. And clarity gives us confidence. I want you, if you're a leader, think of the places in your leadership, in your division that you're confused around. You're derailed, right? Now I want you to think about what is it going to take to get me clear? Because right now you're confused, right? How to do this thing. We got to get into clarity, and then the clarity, we can move the train. But a lot of us, we get derailed, we get confused in something, right? And we're over here derailed, disempowered, and then we're trying to move the train. No. Stop. What do you need to get clear in? Then let's move the train.
Yeah, I'm loving this, Dena. So the things I'm hearing is that a good system and process will bring clarity and confidence, and it'll remove chaos and confusion. And if you can create that environment, that's when people can find their way. They can find their way to that vision and purpose that you were talking about before. You also touched on something, is your external stakeholders, like your customers, will then also feel the benefit of that. So it's good for the brand of your team as well.
100%.
Yeah, really good. So far we've had 2 steps. We've had vision, we've had values and purpose, and now we've had systems and processes. Tell us about the third.
So the third is all about greatness, sparking greatness. When you start to show up like a greatness leader that has a vision, that has purpose, that's leading your team with authenticity, and you've created systems and structures, and you're committed to your team winning, not only just in the objective, but as individuals. This third piece is all about mentorship, greatness, sparking greatness. And you touched on it a little earlier. Yes, as a leader, you want to drive your team to success, whatever your goals are, but you have a whole bunch of individuals. I think it's really easy as a leader to look as your team as a whole, right? 20 guys or 30 people or 80 people versus as individuals. These are moms. These are dads. These are grandparents. These are a young person right out of college. This is his first, job. These are individuals that, like you said, want to be seen and heard. They want to be challenged, right? So the mentorship piece of leadership is you pulling out the greatness in your people as individuals. And you only do that when you start to have those one-on-ones. You start to encourage them as an individual. And you don't want to be a great leader if you just want to drive results. That's your decision. Those are the people that, I don't coach that. I coach greatness leaders who want to really change the world and drive their people to not only the objective, but to their own greatness. I want your guy who has worked for you for 2 years or 5 years, when he leaves, he says, you've been the best boss I've ever had. You pulled the greatness out of me. You mentored me in great ways. I'm a better person because of you. And that's the leaders I'm passionate about empowering and training, and you are too. And I think that's a game you got to play, because we're always winning the game we're playing. If you're winning a smallness game, if you're playing a smallness game, you're winning a smallness game. But if you really want to play a greatness game, it is all about your greatness sparking your people's greatness as individuals. And on my desk here, because I think it's a very, very powerful word. It's and. So group, empower them, drive them, give them what they need as a group to drive those results, and get to know them as individuals. What is their purpose? What makes this job meaningful? How can you help them succeed? That's the greatness game worth playing.
Loving it, Dena, and this responsibility to help others to find their own greatness. There's a few things I'd like to unpack there. One is the power of your team is the collection of their superpowers. It's the collection of their superpowers. That's the value of your team. So helping people find those superpowers, and the superpowers will not be written on their job description. It'll be at the depth of a conversation and the depth of you paying attention to what you're seeing in front of you, really staying curious and paying attention to what's in front of you. And Stephen Chedleski, one of our favorite guests that's been on the show, one of his sayings always sticks with me. And that is that it's very hard to read the label on the jar from inside the jar. So what you'll be doing in some of this respect is bringing to consciousness what may be subconscious or unconscious to them. So elevating their awareness of the gifts that they're bringing to the table, and then allowing them to flourish and allowing those to come through. The bit I want to unpack, Dena, because this is challenging for some people, and I'll stick up my hand and say I've never had this one, but I've seen it countless times. The thought of developing others and nurturing their gifts, etc., for many leaders feels threatening. They feel like, well, why would I be training up someone to be my successor? What if they become, better than me, and all this kind of stuff, which in my view is a very limiting belief. But how do you coach through that? Like when someone does feel threatened by a superstar that's coming through in their team?
That's a really interesting point, because I have definitely been there. That's a fear. That's a smallness thought, right? It's more about insecurity of that leader, right? He's insecure that this person is going to take over his job or her job. So it's coming from that place of fear and doubt, which in my world, we would address that as it is. It is a fear and doubt. And I think that's normal. We all have smallness thoughts. Smallness keeps us very scared and limited, and it also keeps us in our comfort zone. So in leadership, when we are leading from our comfort zone, we are not doing anything bold. We're not doing anything courageous. We're not having 10-minute one-on-ones. We're not asking, for their purpose. We're not mentoring them. We're not doing anything what we're talking about today, because I'm going to stay in my comfort zone and I'm just going to drive one objective. And what that shows me is a leader that's leading from fear and doubt. And that's part of our smallness. So what I would challenge you in saying is you start showing up in your greatness and be the leader you were born to be. Let go of those smallness limiting thoughts that are completely sabotaging your leadership. Step into your greatness. Start doing bold, courageous things. And one of those is mentoring your team. Now, we all know that companies grow. They need more and more leaders, right? So we've got to be mentoring our next generation of leaders. But when you think this person is going to take over, you're not going to do that. You're going to stay in your smallness and your comfort zone and not do anything that we talked about today at all, right? Because you're scared they're going to take over your job. So what I would say is start listening to your greatness, start playing a greatness game, start being bold and courageous in your leadership. Start mentoring people and pointing them to the pathways of leadership in your organization. Leadership just doesn't happen. There's usually a pathway, right? So if you have someone in your division that wants to move up, which probably many people do, doesn't mean that they're going to take over your job. So let's create a pathway. About part of mentorship is, what do you want your path to be, right? And giving up the smallness and the fear and the doubt that they want to take over your job. And guess what? If you don't show up in your greatness, they will take over your job. It's that simple. So you're solving it. You're solving it for themselves. If they're motivated in their greatness and they want your job, but you're staying in your smallness and not mentoring them, listen, they'll find a way to take your job. The best way for job security is lead by your greatness.
That's where I think it is a great example of a limiting belief, to use it literally this time. Like we all have limiting beliefs, by the way, whether we realize it or not. But in this case, it's a literal limiting belief, because you're going to limit others around you, which they may break through anyway, like you said, but you're also going to limit yourself. So if you're not thinking about who your next successor is, can your boss ever promote you? No, because you've become too critical. You've become the point of dependency of the team that you're leading, and there's no one to step into the breach when you get an opportunity to step up. So it's limiting your team, but it's also limiting yourself. If you want to take a selfish approach, it's going to limit yourself as well. All right, Dena, this has been really a wonderful conversation. So we've got a 3-step approach where you can leap into your greatness and get away from your smallness. So, and thinking about, regardless of how big your team is, could be a team of 3 through to a company of 3,000, to be focusing on these 3 things: having vision, having values, having purpose, having systems and processes, and being able to step into your greatness and to generate the next level of great leaders. If you can put these things in place, all of those other problems that you'll deal with from time to time they'll become less of them, but also you'll have the space to be able to deal with other things in your life and in your business and in your team. So, Dena, absolutely thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. I'd like to now go to our rapid round. So these are the same 4 questions that we ask all of our guests. The first one is, what's the one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20?
So many. What I wish I knew at 20 was my superpowers. I wish I owned them on the level that I own them now. I wish I knew I had them identified, because it is, I have a saying, your water is your gold, which means the things that are water to you, they're just your superpowers. You just do them really, really well. They are your gold. And I didn't have them identified till later. And I wish I did at 20.
That's a really interesting one. I've not heard it pitched that way, but it's those things that you find so easy and so natural that you don't even realize it's a superpower, because you don't realize that other people struggle with that thing, right? Yeah, that's really interesting. All right, what's your favorite book?
I would say little one, but mighty, The 4 Agreements. The 4 Agreements, amazing marriage. It's just one of those that will hit you at the core. You can read in a weekend and really powerful.
All right, great. And what's your favorite quote?
My quote is actually in the beginning of my book, and it says, a bird sitting on a tree is never afraid of the branch breaking, because her trust is not in the branch, but on her own wings. And that just comes back to trusting ourselves as, again, trusting our authenticity, trusting our leadership, trusting our greatness. When you go to a new level of trust, your whole life changes.
Yeah. All right. Lovely, Dena. And finally, there's going to be people that are listening to this show that are going to be curious about your work. They're going to be curious about your frameworks. They're going to be curious about how they can step into their greatness. How do people find you if they would like to get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So the easiest way is my website, denapatton.com, denapatton.com. And that is where you can find out about my coaching packages, my book, The Greatness Game. And then also you can hop on a call. If this is something that you want to see, if we're fit to work together, there's buttons on my website, and get on my schedule and let's talk.
All right. Brilliant, Dena. Thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and wisdom today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mixbeers.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.